David Smith here with another Flip Classroom math video. A few tips before we get started. First, remember that you can slow down or speed up the playback if that helps you follow along. You can also pause the video at any point to perfect your notes, or if you want to try the problems before I explain them. Lastly, remember that you could turn on the captions and read my words going along the bottom of your screen. Today's topic, solving quadratic equations review. So we're going to go through all the techniques that we used when we were solving our quadratics in the last chapter. Starting with, the first one was when the equations were in the form of x squared equals k, some constant all by itself on the other side of the equation. So I have examples for that. Here's the basic form, x squared in this case equals 49. So we take the square root of both sides and get x equals 7. Now I'm not all the way done. What didn't I put? Plus, minus. Remember, negative 7 squared is also 49. So this has two solutions, this particular one. These equations can also have one solution or no solutions. For example, if I had x squared equals negative 64, well, that might look good. Like, oh, the square root is negative 8. Negative 8 squared is positive 64. So this one is no real solution. So just remember that. Every year somebody forgets and loses a few points on one of the tests. Okay, now that's the simple form. Some of these are going to you're going to start with a much more complicated form, and your task is to reduce that equation down to this simple form so you can take the square root of both sides. So take a look at this one. You're going to need to use your equation manipulation skills to get this one done. Pause the video and see what you can do. Okay, let's take a look. First step, let's get rid of the 5 from this side. Remember, we're trying to isolate the variable, get it all alone. So now we have 2x squared equals 32. Now to get the 2 off the x squared, I can divide both sides by 2. It's going to cancel this out. We're going to get x squared equals 16. Now when I take the square root of both sides, I get x equals plus minus 4. So again, two solutions for this one as well. So that's your basic form. That was our first lesson in solving quadratic equations. The next thing we did is we moved on to the null factor law. So to review, the null factor law is basically anything times 0 is 0. Doesn't matter what the other thing is. If it's being multiplied by 0, it's going to be 0. So we exploit that law to solve quadratic equations. So a pretty basic one here is 3x times x plus 5 equals 0. Now if you remember when we did these, we branched. We solved this one, 3x equals 0. Divide both sides by 3. This gives us x equals 0. So that's one solution to this quadratic. The other one was x plus 5 equals 0. Subtract 5 from each side, x equals negative 5. So that's the second solution. Remember, you can always write your answers like this if you want, in your curly brackets. Okay? Now this one is a little bit more complicated. Same idea. We have this thing times this thing. So if either thing is 0, the whole thing is 0. So we branch. X minus 6 equals 0. Add 6 to both sides. X equals 6. There's one answer. Now this one is a little bit more complicated. 3x plus 18 equals 0. Subtract 18 from both sides. 3x equals negative 18. Divide each side by 3. X equals negative 6. There's our second answer. So both of these have two solutions. Okay, the next lesson we covered was using factoring to solve quadratic equations. Now this goes all the way back to our factoring chapter where we talked about all the different ways of factoring, and as a reminder, all those factoring methods came into play when solving quadratic equations. So if you're a little shaky on your factoring, you probably want to dig back into that chapter and review all those techniques. Okay, so here's a basic one. This is a GCF factoring problem. I only have two terms and I don't have a difference of squares. Remember, if you have two terms, it's usually GCF or difference of squares. So I can factor out something from both of these terms. I have a 2x in each, so this becomes 2x times x plus 13. equals 0. So I just factored out my greatest common factor. Now I have two things that are multiplied. I can use my null factor law to do 2x equals 0. That's my first branch. Divide through by 2, and I get x equals 0. That's my first solution. This branch is x plus 13 equals 0, which gives us x equals negative 13. So my two answers are 0 and negative 13. Moving on, a little bit more challenging. Now first off, notice I don't have a 0 side. So I have to get everything over to one side so that I have 0 on the other side. So I'm going to add 8 to both sides. X squared plus 6x plus 8 equals 0. Now take a look at this one. This has three terms. So it's either a perfect square or it's going to be a product sum type factoring problem. So for it to be a perfect square, 8 needs to be a perfect square, and it's not. So we can throw that pattern away. So this would be a product sum. Let's see if we can do that. We need two numbers that multiply to 8 that add to 6. Now those numbers are 2 and 4. So this one just becomes x plus 2 times x plus 4 equals 0. So to summarize, again, what we did is we looked for two numbers that multiply to 8 that add to 6. Those numbers are 2 and 4, so we can just plug them in here. Now I can do my branch. X plus 2 equals 0. Subtract 2 from each side. X equals negative 2. This branch is x plus 4 equals 0. X equals negative 4. So my two solutions here are minus 2 and minus 4. Okay, now the last one. Check this one out. If you'd like, pause the video, see if you can do it. I think it's the most complicated of all three that we're working on here. Okay, let's see how you did. First step, I need a 0 on one side. I'm going to add 24 to both sides. 2x squared plus 16x plus 24 equals 0. Now I'm going to look for a GCF because I have a number in front of my x squared. It's better if I can get rid of that. And sure enough, there's a 2, there's a 2, there's a 2 in all three of those terms. Now I could factor it out, but since I have an equation, there's a better way. I can just divide through by 2. Divide every term by 2. So just by 2, by 2, by 2, by 2. What I'm doing is I'm dividing each side of the equation by 2. These cancel. This becomes x squared. 16 over 2 is 8x. 24 over 2 is plus 12. And 0 over 2, still 0. Okay, so now I'm going to look. I've got three terms. So it's either going to be a product sum or it's going to be a perfect square. 12 is not a perfect square, so I'm going to try to do this one with a product sum. Two numbers that multiply to 12 that add to 8. This is a good one. Those two numbers are 2 and 6, because 6 times 2 is 12, 6 plus 2 is 8. So now I can just go to x plus 2 times x plus 6 equals 0. Okay, so now I've factored the non-zero side. Now I do my branch. X plus 2 equals 0. X equals negative 2. This branch is x plus 6 equals 0. X equals negative 6. My two solutions here are minus 2 and minus 6. Action. Okay, the last technique we used for solving our quadratic equations was splitting the middle term. And as you probably remember now, that's like one of the harder techniques to do. I've got a couple problems. Hopefully this kindles your knowledge. If you need to dig back into that particular lesson, please do that. Okay, so splitting the middle term. I have a 3-term quadratic set equal to 0. So your first thought should be, can I factor this 3 out? That would make this more simple, but nope, there's no 3 in these two. Can't do that. So now, is this a perfect square? Could that and that be perfect squares? But they're not. So that's not going to work. Product sum. Product sum doesn't work when you have a number in front of the x squared term. So that's not going to work. So that leaves us with splitting the middle term. So AC, remember I multiply my A and my C. That's going to be 3 times negative 2. That's negative 6. Now I want two numbers that multiply to negative 6 that add up to -1. And what would those be? Those would be positive 2 times -3. That's -6. 2 plus -3 is -1. So 2 and -3 are how I'm going to split my middle term. Now when I do that, let's bring this down, 3x squared. I'm going to put the minus 3x here because that's a nice common factor. And then I do my plus 2x there, minus 2 equals 0. And notice those two lined up pretty well with a nice common factor there as well. Okay, so let's do that. My common factor for this pair is 3x. That's going to leave x minus 1 inside there, plus my common factor here is just a 2, and that's also going to leave x minus 1 equal to 0. So these two factors are the same. That's our confirmation that we did this correct. So now I bring these two down. 3x plus 2 times x minus 1 equals 0. Now I have my fully factored non-zero side. I've got my two little equations to solve. I have 3x plus 2, I don't need the parentheses, equals 0. So let's solve that. Subtract 2 from each side. 3x equals -2. Divide by 3. X equals -2 over 3. That's my first solution. Now I have x minus 1 equal to 0. X minus 1 equals 0. Move the 1 over. X equals 1. So my two solutions for this one are -2/3 and 1. Okay, let's try this last problem. Perhaps a little bit more difficult, certainly good practice. If you want to pause the video now, see if you can do that, please try. Okay, so first off, I need to set one side equal to 0. So let's subtract 5 from both sides. 6x squared minus 29x minus 5 equals 0. Now let's take a look at this three-term quadratic. Could this be a perfect square? Nope. I need both of these terms to be a perfect square. It's not, so I can't use that pattern. Could it be a product sum? Nope. I got a 6 in front of my x squared term. Can't use that pattern. I have three terms, so it's not a difference of squares. Okay, so let's try our split the middle term. AC is going to be 6 times -5 equals -30. So now we need two factors of -30 that add up to -29. How about positive 1 times -30? Plus 1 times -30 equals -30, plus 1 plus -30 is -29. So that works. I have positive 1 and -30. So we're going to split this middle term using those two numbers. 6x squared minus 30x plus x minus 5. Okay, so I just split my middle term using these little factors I found there. Now I take this pair, factor out the GCF from there. That's going to be 6x times x minus 5. That gets us that factors these two. Now, I don't have anything there, but I have a 1. So I can always factor out 1 times x minus 5. These two are the same, so my last step is going to be 6x plus 1 times x minus 5. All of this is equal to 0. Okay, so let's bring this over here. Now I have to do my branch. I have to set that equal to 0 and solve, and that equal to 0 and solve. So the first one, 6x plus 1 equals 0. Subtract 1, 6x equals -1. X equals -1 over 6. So that's my first solution. Now we branch with x minus 5. X minus 5 equals 0. Add 5 to both sides. X equals 5. That's going to give us, for this one, -1/6 and 5 as our solutions. Now that you've finished the video, take a moment to jot down any questions that you have so you can bring them to our next class and get some help. You could also watch the video again to perfect your understanding. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button down below, and if you'd like to help me grow my YouTube channel, please click subscribe.